Please, I haven't eaten in 2 days, the homeless woman whispered, clutching a chipped cup. The elegant woman across the cafe slowly stood, eyes soft, posture royal. Princess Diana paid the bill without a word. Chairs scraped. Conversations died. Then she did something that made the entire room freeze. What happened next crossed a line no royal ever had. Quick question before we begin. Where are you watching from today? Please, just let me finish. The cafe buzzed with low chatter and clinking cups, warmth hanging in the air like a promise meant for others. Near the window, the homeless woman sat hunched over a half-empty plate, her fingers trembling as she lifted the spoon. Her coat was too thin, her hair unwashed, her eyes permanently braced for rejection. A sharp voice cut through the room. You can sit here. The manager stood stiffly beside her table, jaw tight, eyes darting toward the well-dressed patrons. The woman flinched, shoulders curling inward as if to disappear. She glanced down at the plate, then back up, lips parting slowly. I'm almost done, she said quietly. Someone paid for it. Murmurs rippled through the cafe. A few people looked away. Others stared, curiosity mixing with discomfort. No one moved. Across the room, a blonde woman in a simple sweater paused mid-sip, her blue eyes fixed on the scene, expression unreadable. She set her cup down with deliberate care. The manager crossed his arms. This is a private establishment. Customers are complaining. The homeless woman nodded quickly, too quickly. I'll go, she whispered. Her hand shook as she reached for the plate, spoon clattering loudly against porcelain. The sound echoed, too loud for such a small mistake. A chair scraped. The blonde woman stood. She walked slowly, not rushed, not hesitant, each step measured. Conversations faded as heads turned. There was something about her presence. Calm, commanding, gentle yet immovable. She stopped beside the table. Is there a problem? Her voice was soft, but it carried. The manager stiffened. She doesn't belong here. The homeless woman froze, eyes fixed on the table. Her face burned with shame. The blonde woman looked at the empty cup, the half-eaten meal, the thin hands gripping the edge of the table. Her expression changed. Not anger, not pity, but something deeper. She's eating, the woman said simply. That's not the issue, the manager replied. This place has standards. A hush fell. The blonde woman reached into her bag and placed money on the table, far more than the cost of the meal. The bills lay flat, undeniable. I'll cover anything else, she said. The manager hesitated, then nodded stiffly, retreating a step. The homeless woman looked up, eyes wide, voice barely audible. Thank you. The blonde woman met her gaze. What's your name? The woman swallowed. Margaret. A pause lingered, heavy with meaning. The blonde woman pulled out a chair, and then, in full view of everyone, she sat down. Gasps fluttered through the cafe. Someone dropped a spoon. Phones remained untouched, disbelief rooting everyone in place. Margaret stared. You don't have to. I want to, the woman replied. A server hovered nervously. Ma'am, are you? The blonde woman looked up, eyes steady. Bring us tea. For two. Recognition crept across faces. Whispers spreading like wildfire. Someone covered their mouth. Because the woman sitting across from Margaret, calm, composed, utterly unafraid, was Princess Diana, and she wasn't finished. If she doesn't belong here, Diana said softly, then neither do I. The cafe doors suddenly opened, and someone important walked in. You're causing a scene, Your Highness. The cafe no longer felt warm. The air tightened, every breath shared by strangers who suddenly realized they were witnesses. The doors had barely stopped swinging when the man stepped inside. Tailored coat, polished shoes, authority stitched into every movement. He scanned the room once, then he saw her, Princess Diana, sitting across from a homeless woman, his jaw set. He approached with long, purposeful strides, ignoring the whispers curling behind him like smoke. Ma'am, he said, voice clipped, respectful only on the surface. This isn't appropriate. Margaret stiffened. Her fingers curled into her sleeves, eyes darting between faces. Shame crawled back into her posture, familiar and suffocating. Diana looked up calmly. We're having tea. The man lowered his voice, but the tension amplified it. People are uncomfortable. A patron nearby muttered, This is ridiculous, shaking her head. Another whispered, Why would she do this here? Margaret began to rise. It's all right, she murmured. I'll go. I always do. Her chair scraped softly as she stood halfway, hands shaking. Diana reached out, not touching, just enough to stop her. Please sit. Margaret hesitated, then obeyed, eyes glassy. The man exhaled sharply. With respect, this establishment has rules and expectations. Diana glanced around. Well-dressed diners avoided her gaze now. Some stared openly. Judgment pressed in from every angle. Expectations of whom? Diana asked. Silence answered. The manager reappeared, wringing his hands. We've had complaint. Guests are threatening to leave. A man at the bar scoffed. Good, let them. Another snapped back. This isn't a shelter. Margaret's face crumpled. She stared at the table, tears threatening but never falling. I shouldn't have come, she whispered. I ruined things. The man leaned closer to Diana. This is humiliating for everyone involved. Diana's expression hardened, not with anger, but resolve. For everyone, she stood slowly. Chairs creaked as people shifted, bracing. Cameras still didn't rise. No one wanted proof of their own silence. Diana placed a hand on the table. Humiliation, she said quietly, is being hungry in a room full of food. The man blinked, caught off guard. A server approached, voice trembling. Tea, for two. Diana nodded, then turned to Margaret. Did you enjoy your meal? Margaret swallowed. It was warm, she said. I forgot what that felt like. A sharp inhale rippled through the room. The man straightened. This ends now. Diana met his eyes. No, this begins now. Murmurs erupted. Some patrons stood, others watched in stunned stillness. Outside, a flash of light burst through the window. Then another, and another. The problem isn't her presence, Diana said evenly. It's your indifference. Cameras were gathering, and the world was about to see everything. Mummy, why is that lady crying? The question cut through the tension like a blade wrapped in silk. A small girl stood near the counter, barely 6 years old, her school cardigan hanging loose on narrow shoulders. She tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, eyes fixed not on Princess Diana, but on Margaret. The cafe froze again. The mother flushed, instinctively pulling her daughter closer. Don't stare, she whispered, glancing around in embarrassment. But the child didn't look away. She stepped forward, shoes squeaking softly against the tiled floor, curiosity untouched by fear or class. Margaret noticed her then. Their eyes met. Margaret's breath caught. She tried to smile, failed, and quickly wiped at her cheeks with the back of her hand. I'm all right, love, she said softly, voice breaking anyway. The girl frowned. You don't look all right. A few patrons shifted uncomfortably. The man in the tailored coat cleared his throat, irritated. This really isn't. Why is she alone? The girl asked, louder now. No one answered. Diana turned slowly, lowering herself to the child's level. What do you think? She asked gently. The girl considered this. Maybe people didn't listen. Something broke in the room. The mother stepped forward, mortified. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Diana said, standing again. She's right. Margaret stared at the child as if seeing daylight after years underground. I used to have a little girl, she whispered suddenly. The words slipped out before she could stop them. About her age. The room inhaled sharply. Diana's eyes softened. Where is she? Margaret shook her head. They said I wasn't fit. No home, no money, no chances. Her voice dropped. No dignity. The child reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled chocolate bar. She held it out solemnly. For later, she said. Margaret's hands trembled as she accepted it. Tears finally fell, silent and unstoppable. That's enough, the suited man snapped, face reddening. This is turning into a spectacle. Diana turned on him, not sharply, not angrily, but with a quiet authority that commanded stillness. Children don't perform, she said. They reveal. The man opened his mouth, closed it. A man near the window stood, then a woman beside him. One by one, chairs scraped back. Coins appeared on tables. Bills followed. Someone ordered another meal. A ripple of movement spread, awkward, uncoordinated, but real. Margaret looked around in disbelief. I didn't ask for this. I know, Diana replied. That's why it matters. The child smiled at Margaret. You can sit with us if you want. Before anyone could react, the cafe door burst open again. This time, there was no mistaking the urgency. Sometimes, Diana said quietly, truth arrives holding a child's hand. Uniformed security stepped inside, and they weren't smiling. Everyone remained seated. The words landed heavy and absolute. 2 uniformed security officers stepped fully inside the cafe, their presence slicing through the fragile warmth that had begun to form. Conversations died instantly. A fork clattered to the floor. The child was pulled back by her mother without protest. Confusion flickering across her face. Margaret's shoulders collapsed inward again. I knew it, she whispered. This is where it ends. Diana remained seated. She did not look at the officers at first. Instead, she poured tea into Margaret's cup. Hands steady, movements deliberate. Steam rose between them like a quiet defiance. One officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, we've received multiple calls. You're being asked to leave. Diana finally looked up. On what grounds? You're disrupting business. the officer replied, rehearsed and careful. His eyes flicked to the suited man, who gave a subtle nod. Margaret stood abruptly. It's my fault, she said quickly. I'll go. Please don't make trouble for her. Her chair scraped back violently. Diana stood with her this time. No, Diana said, voice calm but unyielding. You're not leaving alone. The room stirred. A man near the door muttered. This has gone too far. Another whispered. She's risking everything. The suited man stepped forward. With respect, Your Highness, this situation is spiraling. There are optics to consider. Diana turned to him slowly. Human dignity is not an optic. One officer shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, please cooperate. Diana glanced around the cafe at the averted eyes, the clenched jaws, the patrons suddenly unsure of their own morality. Then she did something no one expected. She reached for Margaret's hand. The touch was gentle, grounding. Margaret gasped softly, as if the contact itself was permission to exist. We'll leave, Diana said, but not like this. She turned to the room. How many of you walked past her today? Silence. How many saw her hunger and chose comfort instead? No one answered. The officer hesitated. Ma'am, Diana lifted her hand slightly. If this woman is a disruption, she said clearly, then so am I. Outside, the flashes intensified. Shouts carried faintly through the glass. Diana, look this way. The cafe felt suddenly too small for the moment unfolding inside it. Margaret squeezed Diana's hand. You don't have to do this. Diana met her eyes. I already am. The suited man's phone buzzed. He glanced down and paled. History doesn't change in palaces, Diana said softly. It changes in rooms like this. The man looked up, voice tight. This just reached the palace. What would you do if standing up meant losing everything? She's gone too far this time. The cafe felt smaller by the second. Outside, voices layered over one another. Reporters, bystanders, curious onlookers, drawn by whispers traveling faster than truth. Flashes pulsed through the windows like distant lightning. Inside, the suited man pressed his phone tight to his ear, nodding sharply, his face drained of color. Yes, I understand, he murmured. Immediately. He ended the call and looked at Diana as if she had become something dangerous. This is no longer a private matter. Margaret shrank back instinctively. I told you, she whispered. People like me don't survive attention. Diana turned slightly toward her. People like you have survived far worse. The cafe door creaked open again. This time it wasn't security. A woman in a tailored coat entered briskly, heels sharp against the floor. Her eyes locked onto Diana instantly. Your Highness, she said, tight smile in place. We need to speak, now. Diana studied her calmly. You're welcome to join us. The woman hesitated, glancing at Margaret, then at the watching crowd. Not here. This is exactly where we should speak, Diana replied. A man near the counter scoffed. Unbelievable. Another patron snapped back. Sit down if you're uncomfortable. Tension crackled. The woman lowered her voice. This image, this association, will be everywhere within minutes. Diana lifted her chin. Good. Margaret's breath hitched. I don't want to be trouble. The woman's gaze flicked to her. No one said you were. The silence that followed said otherwise. Outside, someone shouted, Is it true she's homeless? Another voice followed, louder, Is that really Diana? Margaret covered her face with trembling hands. Please, I can't do this. Diana placed a hand over Margaret's. Look at me. Margaret did. Tears streamed freely now. You are not a scandal, Diana said softly. You are a person. The woman exhaled sharply. This is reckless. Diana stood again, the room instinctively straightening with her. What's reckless, she said, is teaching the world that compassion must ask permission. The suited man stepped forward. There will be consequences. Diana met his stare. There always are. The cafe door rattled as more people pressed outside. Someone inside began recording, finally breaking the unspoken rule of silence. Margaret whispered, Why me? Diana answered without hesitation. Because they expected me to look away. The woman's phone buzzed. She checked it once, then looked up sharply. We need to leave. Now. Diana glanced at Margaret. Do you trust me? Margaret nodded, barely. Diana turned toward the door. Pressure doesn't reveal weakness, Diana said quietly. It reveals truth. As Diana stepped forward, a voice from outside shouted a name that made Margaret freeze. Margaret, is that really you? The voice from outside cut through the noise like a ghost calling from another life. Margaret froze mid-step. Her hands slipped from Diana's grasp, fingers curling inward as if burned. Slowly she turned toward the glass doors. A man stood just beyond them, older now, heavier, but unmistakable. His coat was neat, his posture confident. He looked like someone who had landed safely on the other side of life. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. "No," she whispered finally. "Not him." The suited man stiffened. The woman in the tailored coat narrowed her eyes. "You know her?" The man outside pushed through the crowd, stopping just short of the threshold. "I do," he said loudly enough for cameras to catch. "Or I did." Murmurs erupted. Margaret's breath became shallow. "Please," she begged, not looking at anyone in particular. "Don't do this." The man shook his head slowly, a practiced sadness settling on his face. "I tried to help her once. She refused. Some people choose this life." The words landed like a slap. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. A reporter leaned forward. "Is that true?" Margaret's knees buckled slightly. Diana caught her just in time. "That's a lie," Diana said calmly. The man scoffed. "With respect, Your Highness, you don't know her. I lost everything trying to save her." Margaret finally looked at him, eyes blazing through tears. "You took my daughter," she said, voice shaking but loud. "You told them I was nothing." The cafe erupted. The woman in the tailored coat turned sharply to Diana. "This is spiraling out of control." The man continued, relentless now. "She was unstable. Always was. This," he gestured at Margaret, "proves it." Phones rose everywhere. Margaret covered her ears. "Stop, please stop." Diana stepped fully in front of her. "Enough," Diana said, her voice slicing clean through the chaos. The man sneered. "You're defending a woman who abandoned her own child." A beat of silence. Margaret collapsed into a chair, sobbing openly now, years of shame crashing down at once. "I tried," she cried. "I begged them." The suited man leaned toward Diana. "This is bad. Public sentiment is shifting." Diana looked around and saw it. The hesitation, the doubt creeping back into faces that had only moments ago softened. Betrayal didn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it came wrapped as truth. Diana straightened slowly. "You think this ends her?" she said quietly to the man. "It doesn't." The man laughed once. "Watch it." A notification pinged loudly from someone's phone. Headlines were already forming. Margaret whispered, broken, "I ruin everything." Diana squeezed her shoulder. "No," she said. "They just revealed themselves." "Cruelty sounds convincing," Diana said coldly, "when power tells the story." Outside, the crowd began to turn, and Diana realized she might lose them all. That's not the whole story. The voice came from behind the crowd. Steady, unfamiliar, unafraid. Heads turned. A woman pushed forward from the edge of the onlookers, clutching a worn folder to her chest. Her coat was modest, her expression firm in the way only someone carrying truth could manage. She stopped beside the cafe door, eyes locking onto Margaret. Margaret's breath caught. "Elaine?" The woman nodded once. "You didn't think I'd stay quiet forever, did you?" The man who had accused Margaret stiffened. "This doesn't concern you." Elaine ignored him. She stepped fully inside, cameras swiveling toward her. "It concerns me," she said, "because I was there." A murmur spread like electricity. Diana watched closely, instinct sharpening. "Please," she said gently. "Go on." Elaine opened the folder with trembling hands. Papers spilled out, official forms, stamp dates, signatures long buried. "Margaret didn't abandon her child," she said clearly. "She lost her to a system that punished poverty." The man laughed sharply. "That's absurd." Elaine held up a document. "You filed the report. You labeled her unfit. You never mentioned the shelter that turned her away, or the job she lost the same week." Gasps erupted. Margaret stared, disbelief and hope colliding in her chest. "You kept these?" Elaine nodded. "I tried to fight it. I was young. I failed." Her voice cracked. "I'm not failing again." The suited man stepped forward. "This is hearsay." Elaine met his eyes. "These are records." Phones rose higher now. Reporters leaned in. The narrative was shifting, slowly, dangerously. Diana stepped beside Elaine. "Thank you," she said simply. Margaret rose unsteadily to her feet. "I loved her," she said, voice shaking but loud enough. "Every day." The man who had accused her backed away a step. "This is being twisted." Diana turned to the crowd. "You were shown a convenient story," she said. "Now you're seeing a complicated one." Silence followed. Then a single clap. Then another. A man near the window spoke up. "We judged her." A woman whispered. "We believed him." The weight of it pressed down, collective and undeniable. Elaine gathered the papers. "There's more," she said. "But it doesn't belong here." Diana nodded. "We'll make space for it." The woman in the tailored coat leaned close to Diana. "This is becoming irreversible." Diana didn't look at her. "Good." Margaret exhaled shakily. "What happens now?" Diana took her hand again, firmer this time. "Now," she said, "we don't retreat." Outside, the crowd surged, not with hostility now, but hunger for truth. Justice doesn't arrive loudly, Diana said. It arrives when someone finally speaks. A reporter shouted a question that froze everyone. Where is Margaret's daughter now? Do you believe the truth can still win when it arrives late? She lives 3 miles from here. Main development. The words detonated in the air. Elaine didn't hesitate. She was adopted, she said, voice steady but eyes wet. Closed process. New name. New life. She paused, then added the sentence no one was ready for. But I never stopped checking. The reporter surged forward. You're saying the daughter is alive? Margaret staggered, grabbing the table for support. Alive. The word barely escaped her throat. After all these years? The man who had accused her snapped. This is outrageous. You're violating privacy. Elaine turned on him. You already did. The cafe erupted. Questions, shouts, the scrape of chairs. Outside, the crowd pressed harder, a living wall of anticipation. Diana raised her hand. Not high, not dramatic, just enough. Silence followed. Margaret, Diana said gently. Do you want to hear this here? Margaret's eyes darted to the cameras, the faces, the world suddenly leaning in. Fear and hope warred across her face. I've lived invisible, she whispered. I don't want her life torn apart. Elaine nodded. She deserves peace. A reporter shouted. Is she famous? Does she know who her mother is? The question hit like a blow. Margaret folded inward. Please stop, she begged. The suited man seized the moment. This has gone far enough. Remove them. Security shifted again. Hesitant, unsure which side history would choose. Diana stepped forward, placing herself between Margaret and the crowd. No names, she said clearly. No photographs. No pursuit. A scoff rose from the back. You can't control this. Diana turned, eyes fierce now. Watch me. She faced the reporters. If you chase a private life for spectacle, she said, you will answer to me. The threat was calm. Absolute. Phones lowered, some in shame, some in calculation. Elaine leaned close to Margaret. I can reach out quietly, through proper channels. Margaret's hands shook. What if she hates me? Diana answered, before Elaine could. Then she'll hate a woman who never stopped loving her. The man who had accused Margaret took a step back, his story collapsing in real time. This is turning against me, he muttered. Diana heard him. No, she said without looking. It's turning toward the truth. Outside, a chant began. Soft at first, then stronger. Let her speak. Let her speak. Margaret looked around, overwhelmed. I can't do this alone. Diana took her hand again, unwavering. You won't. Some reunions aren't meetings, Diana said quietly. They're reckonings. A phone buzzed in Elaine's hand, and the message made her gasp. Elaine's face drained of color. The cafe seemed to tilt as Elaine stared at her phone, fingers tightening around it as if it might vanish. The chanting outside faltered, curiosity sharpening into something dangerous. Margaret noticed first. What is it? She whispered. Elaine looked up slowly. She knows. The words didn't sound real. Knows? What? Margaret asked, already afraid of the answer. Elaine swallowed. She knows you exist. The room inhaled as one. Diana stepped closer, instinctively anchoring the moment. How? Elaine turned the screen slightly. A single message glowed there. Short, careful, unmistakably intentional. I've been told not to reach out, but I need to understand. Margaret's knees weakened. She sank back into the chair, hand pressed to her chest. She reached out first. Elaine nodded. 10 minutes ago. She's been watching the coverage. The suited man cursed under his breath. This is a disaster. Outside, the crowd surged again as if sensing the shift. Reporters shouted new questions. Is there contact? Has the daughter spoken? Diana raised her voice, not loud but clear. There will be no commentary, a reporter pushed back. The public is not entitled to private pain, Diana cut in. Margaret trembled. What if she regrets it? What if this ruins her life? Elaine crouched in front of her. She's an adult now. She asked to understand, not to be exposed. The cafe felt suddenly too bright, too open. Every face seemed like a witness to a moment that should have belonged to only 2 people. Diana leaned in, voice low. You don't have to decide anything here. Margaret shook her head. I've waited my whole life. I won't rush her now. Another message appeared. Elaine's breath caught again. I don't want cameras. I just want the truth. Margaret let out a sob that was half laughter, half release. She sounds like me. The man who had accused Margaret stood rigid, realization dawning too late. This will destroy me. Diana turned to him for the first time in minutes. No, she said evenly. Your choices did that. Security shifted, uncertain now whom they were meant to control. Diana straightened, scanning the room. We're leaving, she announced, quietly. A murmur of protest rose outside. Margaret clutched Diana's hand. Where do I go? Diana didn't hesitate. Somewhere safe. Elaine slipped the phone into her pocket. She asked for time, one meeting, private. Margaret nodded through tears. I can wait, I've learnt how. As they moved toward the door, the chanting outside changed. Less hungry now, more reverent. Diana paused, one last glance at the room that had become a turning point. The longest journeys, Diana said softly, begin after the truth finally arrives. Outside, a single question followed them into the noise, and it threatened to change everything. No cameras, Diana said. Not today. The back entrance opened onto a narrow lane washed in grey afternoon light. The noise of the crowd dulled behind thick brick walls, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the soft rasp of Margaret's breathing as she stepped outside. Diana guided her forward, a steady presence at her side. A car waited unmarked, ordinary, intentionally forgettable. Margaret hesitated at the curb. I don't know how to be this person, she confessed. Someone people see. Diana opened the door herself. Then don't be, she said gently. Be a mother who waited. Inside the car, silence settled. Heavy but no longer hostile. Elaine sat opposite, hands folded, eyes bright with relief and fear braided together. Her message asked for time, Elaine said quietly. Days, maybe weeks. Margaret nodded, staring out the window as the city slipped by. I can wait, she repeated, softer now. Waiting is something I learned well. Diana watched her reflection in the glass lines carved by years of erasure, eyes still searching for permission to hope. Waiting, Diana said, is different when it's chosen. They arrived at a modest townhouse tucked behind trees just beginning to bud. The door closed behind them with a sound that felt final in the best way. Tea was set again, steam rising, a ritual returning under safer light. Margaret wrapped her hands around the cup. I thought dignity was gone forever, she said. Turns out it was just buried. Elaine exhaled, a laugh escaping through tears. You were never invisible, she said. They just didn't look. A knock sounded, soft, careful. Everyone stilled. Diana rose, unhurried. She opened the door to a woman with kind eyes and a folder hugged to her chest. I'm with Family Services, the woman said. Here to ensure privacy and protection. Diana nodded once. Thank you. As arrangements were discussed in low voices, Margaret drifted to the window. Outside, the street remained calm. No flashes, no shouts, just life continuing. She turned back, voice trembling with a new steadiness. If she decides not to meet me, Diana met her gaze. Then you will still have been brave. Margaret swallowed. Bravery feels strange. It often does, Diana replied. The woman from services finished, offering a card. When she's ready, she said, we'll facilitate. On her terms. Margaret pressed the card to her chest like a promise. Diana stepped closer. You did not ruin anything today. Margaret shook her head, tears returning. You stood when no one else would. Diana smiled, small and resolute. That's how standing works. Someone goes first. Hope doesn't fix the past, Diana said softly. It opens the future. Margaret's phone buzzed for the first time, and the name on the screen made her breath stop. Margaret didn't answer the phone. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. The phone buzzed again in Margaret's trembling hand, the screen glowing like a fragile truth she was afraid to touch. Elaine leaned forward slightly, eyes searching Margaret's face for permission. Diana remained still, understanding that some moments must not be rushed. Not even by hope. Read it, Diana said gently. You don't have to respond. Margaret nodded, swallowing hard. Her thumb hovered, then tapped. A message appeared. Longer this time. Careful. Measured. I don't remember your face, but I remember a voice singing. When I was scared. They told me you disappeared. I think that was a lie. Margaret's breath broke into a quiet sob. She pressed her knuckles to her lips. Years of grief folding inward, reshaping itself into something fragile and alive. She remembers, Margaret whispered. Something. Elaine exhaled shakily. That's more than most people get. Margaret lowered herself into the chair, clutching the phone to her chest. I don't want to overwhelm her. Diana stepped closer. Then don't explain, she said. Just be present. Margaret nodded, tears spilling freely now. Slowly, deliberately, she typed. I never stopped loving you. I will wait as long as you need. She didn't send it immediately. Her hand shook. Diana placed a hand over hers. Light, grounding. You're allowed to choose joy, Diana said softly. Margaret pressed send. The reply came faster than expected. Can we meet somewhere quiet? Just once. A sound escaped Margaret that was half laughter, half prayer. She wants to see me. Elaine smiled through tears. On her terms. That matters. Diana turned toward the window. Outside, the day softened into evening. Light thinning but not disappearing. Privacy will be protected, she said. No press. No spectacle. Margaret looked up at her, eyes shining. Why did you stay? Diana met her gaze. Because dignity isn't charity, she said. It's recognition. A gentle knock sounded again. This time a driver confirming arrangements. Everything moved quietly now, deliberately, as if the world itself had agreed to tread lightly. Margaret stood, straighter than before. I don't know how this ends. Diana smiled. Neither do I. Elaine gathered her things. But it's begun. Margaret turned to Diana one last time. You didn't save me. Diana tilted her head. No, Margaret nodded, understanding settling in. You reminded everyone I existed. Diana reached for her coat. That's always been enough. As they prepared to leave, Margaret's phone buzzed once more. She glanced down and froze, hand tightening around the device. Healing, Diana said quietly, isn't loud, but it's unstoppable. The final message was just 6 words, and they changed everything. The 6 words were simple, terrifying, beautiful. Margaret stared at the screen, unable to blink, as if the words might vanish if she did. I'd like to hear your voice. Her breath hitched, sharp and shallow. For years, she had imagined this moment in fragments, faces blurred, outcomes cruel, silence winning. She had never imagined something this gentle. Elaine leaned closer. What does it say? Margaret didn't answer right away. She held the phone out with both hands, as if offering proof that hope could be real. Elaine read it, then pressed her fingers to her mouth, eyes flooding. Diana watched quietly, heart tightening in a way she knew well. This was the moment after survival, the moment courage finally asked for connection. You don't have to call now, Diana said softly. Margaret shook her head. If I don't, I might never. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Her entire life seemed to narrow into that single movement. She pressed call. The ring sounded once, twice. Then a voice, hesitant, careful, unmistakably hers. Hello. Margaret's knees nearly gave out. She sank into the chair, one hand gripping the edge of the table, the other holding the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her voice broke. She stopped, breathed, tried again. Hello, thank you for calling me. Silence. Then a small, uncertain laugh. I didn't know how else to start. That's okay, Margaret whispered. Neither did I. Elaine turned away, giving privacy. Diana did the same, moving toward the window, eyes misting as the quiet miracle unfolded behind her. I don't want answers yet, the voice said. I just wanted to know if you're real. Margaret closed her eyes. I'm here, she said. I always have been. Another pause. Softer now. They said you forgot me. Margaret's voice steadied, every word anchored in truth. I remembered you every day. A breath on the other end. A tremor. Can we talk again, soon? Yes, Margaret said without hesitation. Whenever you want. The call ended gently. No promises demanded. No wounds reopened. Just a door cracked open enough for light to slip through. Margaret lowered the phone slowly, tears streaming freely now. Not from pain but from release. She sounds kind, Elaine whispered. She is, Margaret replied. She always was. Diana turned back to her. You did well. Margaret looked up, eyes bright with something new. I lived long enough to hear her voice. Diana nodded. That's not luck, she said. That's endurance. Outside, evening settled fully, the world unaware of the quiet restoration taking place within those walls. Some reunions begin with a voice, Diana said gently, before they ever find a face. Days later, a private meeting was arranged, and Margaret didn't know if she was ready to walk through that door. The door was already open. The room was quiet in the way only carefully chosen places ever were. Neutral colors, soft lighting, no photographs on the walls. Privacy had been engineered here, every detail designed to protect what was about to happen. Margaret stood just outside the threshold, coat buttoned too tightly, hands clasped as if holding herself together by force alone. She's inside, Elaine said gently. She came alone. Margaret nodded, though her feet refused to move. What if she changes her mind when she sees me? Diana stood beside her, close enough to steady, far enough to let the moment remain Margaret's. Then you will still have honored her courage, she said. And yours. Margaret inhaled slowly, years of waiting condensed into that breath. She stepped forward. Inside, a young woman stood near the window, back turned. She was taller than Margaret remembered, but the posture slightly guarded, shoulders held high against disappointment, was achingly familiar. The young woman turned, time fractured. Neither spoke at first. They simply looked at each other, searching for echoes. Eyes, hands, something undeniable. You sing, the young woman said suddenly. When you're nervous. Margaret's breath caught. You used to hum when you slept. A shaky laugh escaped the young woman. I still do. The distance between them felt immense, then suddenly fragile. I'm not here for explanations, the young woman said quickly. Not yet, Margaret nodded. I won't give them unless you ask. The young woman studied her, really studied her. They told me you disappeared because you didn't care. Margaret's voice barely held. I disappeared because I wasn't allowed to stay. Silence stretched. Not hostile, just heavy. I don't know what to call you, the young woman admitted. Margaret swallowed. You don't have to call me anything. That seemed to matter. The young woman stepped closer, cautiously, as if approaching an animal that might spook. I just wanted to see if you were real. Margaret placed a hand over her heart. I am. Tears welled in the young woman's eyes, despite her effort to stay composed. I've done all right, she said, almost defensively. I built a life. Margaret nodded, pride flooding her features. I hoped you would. They stood there, two lives running parallel for decades, now finally intersecting. From the doorway, Diana watched without intruding, eyes shining, knowing better than to step into something sacred. The young woman spoke again, voice softer now. Maybe we could have coffee sometime. Somewhere normal. Margaret smiled through tears. I'd like that very much. The young woman hesitated, then reached out and hugged her. Brief, careful, real. Margaret closed her eyes. Love doesn't demand the past back, Diana thought quietly. It asks permission to begin. As they pulled apart, the young woman whispered something Margaret never expected to hear. I don't hate you. The words landed softly, but they carried the weight of decades. Margaret froze, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and relief. She searched the young woman's face, bracing for conditions, for distance, for the careful detachment she had learned to expect from the world, but there was none. I don't hate you, the young woman repeated, steadier this time. I thought I would. For years I told myself I should. Margaret's voice trembled. You had every right. The young woman shook her head. I had questions. That's different. They moved to sit side by side, not across from each other. The choice mattered. The space between them shrank into something survivable. I grew up believing I was unwanted, the young woman said, staring at her hands. That belief shaped everything. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. I'm so sorry. I know, she replied. That's why I came. A quiet settled, no longer sharp, no longer afraid. From the doorway, Diana shifted her weight, ready to leave if needed, ready to stay if asked. Elaine waited nearby, eyes wet, saying nothing. The young woman glanced up. She protected this, she said, nodding toward Diana. Didn't she? Margaret smiled faintly. She stood where others stepped away. The young woman nodded once. That matters. She took a breath. I'm not ready for big words, or labels. Margaret answered immediately. I don't need them. Another pause. Another pause. Then the young woman reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Creased, handled often. I found this years ago, she said. In my file. She unfolded it carefully. A lullaby, handwritten, simple, uneven. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. I wrote that. I know, the young woman said softly. I memorized it. Something in Margaret finally gave way. Tears slid down freely, unchecked, but she didn't apologize for them this time. The young woman leaned her head gently against Margaret's shoulder. Not fully, just enough. I don't know what this becomes, she said. Margaret rested her cheek against her hair, barely daring to breathe. Neither do I. Diana stepped back quietly, closing the door just enough to give them space, but not isolation. In the hallway, Elaine whispered, This is more than I hoped for. Diana nodded. It's exactly enough. Inside, the two women sat together. The past no longer a weapon, the future no longer forbidden. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Diana reflected quietly. It's choosing not to bleed anymore. As the meeting ended, the young woman asked one final question, and it was the one Margaret feared most. Why didn't you fight harder? The question arrived without anger, without accusation, but it cut deeper than any shout ever could. Margaret felt it land in her chest, heavy and unavoidable. She didn't look away. Not this time. I did, she said quietly. Every day I was allowed to breathe. The young woman studied her face, searching for cracks, for excuses, for the weakness she had been warned about all her life. They told me you gave up, she said. Margaret shook her head slowly. I was pushed out, again and again. When I stood up, doors closed. When I begged, they wrote reports. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. I never stopped loving you. I just ran out of power. Silence followed, long, honest, necessary. The young woman exhaled. I needed to hear that. Margaret nodded. You didn't owe me forgiveness, only truth. The young woman stood, pacing once, then stopping by the window. My life is good, she said. Complicated. Busy. I don't know how you fit into it. Margaret swallowed. I don't need to fit, she said. I just need to exist in it. That landed. The young woman turned back, eyes shining but steady. Then we start small. Margaret's breath caught. Small is perfect. They hugged again. Longer this time. Less cautious. Still careful, but real. From the hallway, Diana watched as the door opened once more. The young woman stepped out first, her posture lighter than before. She paused when she saw Diana. You didn't have to do all this, she said. Diana met her gaze. No, she replied. But I wanted to. The young woman nodded. Thank you for seeing her. Diana smiled gently. Thank you for being brave enough to look. Margaret joined them, eyes still wet, but her shoulders no longer folded inward. She stood straighter now, not fixed, not healed completely, but visible. As they parted ways, the young woman turned back one last time. Call me, she said, tomorrow. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the world carried on, unaware that something extraordinary had happened quietly, without applause. Diana walked Margaret to the door. This is where I leave you, she said softly. Margaret looked at her, voice thick with gratitude. You changed my life. Diana shook her head. No, she said. You reclaimed it. Margaret stepped into the light, no longer alone. Kindness doesn't rescue people, Diana said quietly. It reminds them who they were before the world forgot. If kindness still matters, comment. She was seen.